Hey, this is Warren Redlick. How are you doing? It is, I'm trying something different this week. We're going to call it Elon Week. Quick pitch for Starship. I'd like to thank Bradford Ferguson, Halter Ferguson Financial, and all my Patreon supporters for helping this channel grow, making it what it is. It's really improving, and their help really helps me. So, and of course, and if you'd like to support this channel, please look in the description below. There's a link to our Patreon channel. There's merch is available, like the Starship t-shirt, Elon-related t-shirts, but I'm trying a different format this week. The idea behind Elon Week is we've got different topics. So we've got Starship, we've got Starlink, we've got Mars, we've got Tesla, and we've got universal basic income at the end. Just to give you an idea where we're heading. Hello, everyone. 2 mics are open. I don't know what that means. I only have 1 mic here. So, double sound? That's weird. I don't know how that's happening. Double sound. I don't know how that could be happening. Let me check. Thank you for telling me that. Let's see what's going on in system preferences. Sounds normal. Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, let's get started. So the idea here is I'm going to talk about different subjects. The subject I think most people want to talk about is universal basic income. I did a video that I published last night. In short, I'm critical of universal basic income, and I'm going to go over what I said in the video and what some of the responses were. But I want to start with, the idea here is let's talk about what happened this week. So let's go straight into it. Before I get into the regular stuff, I just want to quick mention Neuralink. I haven't seen any news about Neuralink this week. I think Neuralink comes into play a little bit in the universal basic income discussion that we might have later, but I didn't see any news about Neuralink this week to talk about. With the Boring Company, they're making progress in Las Vegas. So they're making progress in Las Vegas. It looks like they're getting close to done. There's a channel called Boring Revolution by Will, and he covers the Boring Company extensively, and I recommend watching his channel. He talked this week. I think they're basically done boring the tunnels for the Las Vegas Convention Center. They have to finish the stations. They have to test to make sure that the system is working, carrying the capacity that it should. And there's a lot of, it looks like they're going to be extending the tunnels to casino resorts. There's already a couple, I think, that are going forward, and it's probably going to go to the airport and a lot more. So that's going to be really fun. So, and Matt Burns asks, what about fire code? There's a lot of Will's latest video. If you go to Boring Revolution, his latest video, he breaks down all the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that people keep throwing at anything Elon Musk does. Everything looks great for what Boring Company is doing in Las Vegas. They're on schedule. If they're not ahead of schedule, it's fantastic. So let's get into the other news. So Starship, before we get into Starship itself, Super Heavy is apparently close to getting stacked. So this image showed up from RGV Aerial Photography. And just to be clear, there's a schedule, and we're going to get Tesla's going to be towards the end. These are rings that RGV Aerial Photography, which is a great Twitter account, and they take some great pictures of what's going on in Boca Chica, Texas. It looks like SpaceX is getting ready to start stacking the Super Heavy booster, which is what's going to be required to get Starship into orbit. So I thought this was pretty cool. Elon actually replied to this tweet with something about Lord of the Blank, Lord of the Rings, because these are the rings that are going to be built up. So Elon acknowledged it at least. Now, there was, I need my glasses for this, there was on Twitter a discussion about what the status is of Starship. So sometime very soon, SpaceX is going to do a test launch of Starship, and it's going to go up, I believe, 15 kilometers, which is 10 miles. It's about 9 or 10 miles up, which is higher than airplanes go. I was actually curious, how are they going to be able to send anything up to watch it with cameras? That's going to be fun. Well, Jim, we're going to probably get into politics at the end, but if we have moderators here, let me see. Do we have it? Yeah, please, anything for Trump, please, anything for Trump or Biden, please take it out of the comments. I don't want to see it. Let me just get rid of that. We don't get into Trump Biden stuff here. You want to watch that, go watch CNN or Fox or something. So there was a conversation that the tweet at the top is from Chris B of NSF. And he talked, there was big conversation of what is the 15-kilometer launch going to look like. And Elon, the first tweet that you can see from him, says the hope is that they get a stable, controlled descent with body flaps would be great. Transferring propellant feed from main to header tanks and relight would be a major win. So Elon does not seem overly optimistic about the prospects for this launch. It's just, can they get it to go up to 15 kilometers? That's step one. Once again, which I think that's going to be pretty straightforward. I don't think that's going to be that hard to do. I think there's a static fire maybe today or tomorrow, and then it's going to be ready to go soon. Excuse me. Once it gets up to 15 kilometers, then it's got to come back down. What goes up must come down. And the goal is to see how it descends, how it flies down in that environment. That it's easy to test it in a simulator, it's easy to do other tests, but to actually put it out in the real world. So Elon said we got to look at exactly how the body flaps control pitch, yaw, and roll during descent. And then once the ship gets low enough that they can relight the main engine, flip it in position to land. Even if it doesn't land successfully, it would be fine. And the funny thing was, at the end, somebody asked, if it's not working out, will it splash down offshore, or is there some other plan to terminate the flight? And Elon said, yes, but if it fails right at the end, some landing pair will be needed to fill in the crater. So this is one big-ass ship that, if it doesn't land right, is going to make a big hole in the ground. And a rapid unscheduled disassembly, as people like to say. So this is really nice news to see that there's progress. And there was another thread where Everyday Astronaut, who's another channel I love to follow. I love Chris B on Twitter, and I love Everyday Astronaut. So Everyday Astronaut asked some questions about what's been tested, how it's been tested. And Elon said they tested a small version in a wind tunnel. So it should work at scale, but he had this great thing at the end of the tweet, but reality tends to bite you in the ass. You can simulate, you can try all kinds of things, but no, it's not a water attempt. They're going to try to land it back at Boca Chica, but if it doesn't look, I guess the way it's probably set up is, if the engine doesn't relight, it'll hit the water. If the engine relights, they're going to try to bring it down on the pad, but if it doesn't go well, it's going to hit the pad hard and make a crater. That's the expectation. Yes, litho braking, exactly, Thaddeus. So that's the news with Starship. I guess I didn't take a picture of it, but SN8, serial number, I think it stands for serial number 8 or Starship number 8, is going to be the one doing the 15-kilometer test. And Elon was asked about it. I don't think I saved that. Somebody asked what happens if it blows up, and the next one is basically ready to go. I think I saw this morning they're putting the fins on SN9. So the pace of manufacturing is going strong at Boca Chica, and there's basically another one that's almost ready to go, and then SN10 is being assembled. So they're making progress, and if SN8 doesn't go well, which the odds are it's going to crash. It's going to go boom, and it's probably going to be a lot of fun to watch. Hopefully it sticks the landing, because that would be amazing. But the practical reality is there's a lot of uncertainties. There's a lot of crazy things that can happen. But They're making progress, a lot of good progress on Starship. So I think we covered that one. Let's move on to what's probably more exciting news right now is Starlink. The first thing I'm going to mention is beta pricing. So Starlink is, let me take this off for a second. For those who don't know, Starlink is a network of satellites that SpaceX is launching. And actually, I should put this up then. It's a network of satellites that SpaceX is launching. Currently, they've launched 895 satellites. I don't think all 895 are still in orbit. I think a substantial number of them have been deorbited. Maybe it's either deorbited or on their way out of orbit. Probably more than 60 of them. So I think there's probably more than 800 operational Starlink satellites in the 550 kilometer, 340 mile shell. And they're going to be launching more and more. I think there's another launch scheduled this month, if not two. And they've gone to beta testing, and there's a lot of promising results from beta testing. People are getting good bandwidth. People are getting good latency. I don't think I saved the tweet from Elon, but somebody posted something about the bandwidth and latency, and he said that the latency is going to come down. For those who don't know, that latency is when you send something up to the internet. How long does it take to... I'm going to oversimplify probably and probably get it wrong. It's how long it takes from when you send a signal to how quickly you get a response. Bandwidth is how fast something comes in. So if you want to watch a 4K stream, you need 20 megabits of bandwidth typically. Where if you just want a text message, short text message, you don't need a lot of bandwidth for that. But the latency is how quickly it responds whichever stream is coming down. So they're getting more than 100 megabits down, and they're getting fairly good latency. I don't remember what it was, 30 or 40 milliseconds. And Elon said that latency is going to come down and bandwidth is going to improve as this grows. So this is going really well. And the long-term plan is 12,000 satellites and maybe an extension to 42,000. This is going to provide internet access, first off, to people who don't really have good internet access otherwise. People who are in rural areas, people who are on boats. It should work well on planes. It's already been tested on military planes. So the primary advantage of Starlink is providing internet access to people who don't already have high-speed internet access. Like right now, I have a fiber optic connection to the internet. I have 250 megabits down and 50 megabits up, which is enough for me to do 2 4K streams or 5 streams like this going up. So that, I have ridiculous bandwidth. I don't need Starlink. I think Starlink would be cool to have, but I'm not likely to do that. So that brings me to the other news, which the first bit of news, which is that Starlink sent out emails, or SpaceX sent out emails to potential beta program customers saying it's going to be $99 a month for Starlink, and the hardware is $499 to start up. That's not as bad as it sounds, because it includes a router with Wi-Fi, which you can easily pay $250 for a good router, for a good Wi-Fi router. So they're making progress. And actually, my cousin lives in New Hampshire, north of Boston. I don't think he's invited to participate in the beta yet, but I think he's going to be in it soon, like within the next month or so. So I'll be curious to hear. I'll actually have a personal connection who's using Starlink. So I'm hoping to get some news from him about how it works for him. I believe they have to go further north first. They need more satellites up before they can extend it further south. I'm all the way down in Florida, so it's not going to be useful for people around me for a while. If you've seen my cyber cabin video, I am thinking I would get Starlink for the cyber cabin. The cyber cabin is completely off grid. I actually talked to just a quick update about cyber cabin. I talked to someone, a neighbor, a guy who owns a neighboring property who's really local. And he said, there's no way we're ever getting water and sewer at the cyber cabin, that there's nobody in that area has water and sewer except a very small spot. Electric is possible. It would cost about $15,000. So I'm working actually with some of my friends. We may buy a few other lots and pitch in together to extend electric if we want it. We're going to do solar anyway. I don't think we need the grid, but it doesn't hurt to have the grid. So if we do that, then we might also share a Starlink, because we're probably not going to need to have each of us having our own internet connection. If we did one Starlink and wired it to the neighbors, that would work. So $99 a month is not cheap. It's going to be a very high speed internet connection. It's going to be like, I have 250 megabits down. I believe Starlink is expected to be faster than that in the long run. I'm not sure what the $99 a month covers, what kind of bandwidth you get, and how this translates to the long-term pricing. The interesting thing here is, okay, well, how many customers are they going to have? If you want to get into the business side of this for SpaceX, well, how many customers are they going to have? Well, they're going to have easily 1 million customers in the long run, and probably more like 5 million customers. So if you imagine 5 million customers paying, this would be about $1,000 a year. It's a little more than $1,000 a year. Well, that's $5 billion a year in revenue. And it may be capable of doing a lot more than 5 million. I'm not sure. That's an interesting question. I don't think we have the answer to yet, is what is the capacity of Starlink. What's this question here? What are SNA differences with so many other successful landing maneuvers they've done? Atrax Media. Going back to, let me take this off and we'll go back to Starship for a second. Just going back to Starship. So SpaceX has done landings of the Falcon 9 rocket booster, which is a 3.8 meter wide cylinder that is, I forget how tall. Starship is actually the second stage rather than the first stage. It is 9 meters in diameter, so it is a much larger ship. So it's just a different shape, and I believe the maneuvers that they're going to do to land, this is planned to come in from orbit, which is a much higher velocity. So they're testing a completely different landing strategy because the Falcon 9 booster never reaches orbit. It goes up to it goes up into space. It goes up to as high as, I think, 80 miles and then comes down to a drone ship, or it might go up to 60 miles and then come back down to land. Starship is the second stage, and its long-term plan is it's going to be launched by Super Heavy into orbit, traveling at a much higher velocity, a much higher altitude, and it's going to have to cruise through the atmosphere from coasting down from much higher speeds. So this is early testing of really the last part of Starship's landing. So thank you for asking that question. I hope I answered it well. So what else did I have on Starlink? Going back to Starlink. Oh, this is where Elon talked about latency. So the person was getting 134 megabits per second down, 14.8 megabits per second up, and I don't know if I could see the latency was, the ping was 38 milliseconds. I was close when I said 40. So Elon said latency will improve significantly soon, bandwidth too. I believe the latency is supposed to get down to 20 milliseconds. And the challenge is they just need more satellites to fill out the network, and that's going to help. And there's probably some other things. I don't know. I believe the current generation of Starlink satellite does have the lasers on it, which means the lasers communicate with other Starlink satellites and route the signal. So I think that's coming in fast, and we're going to see this. I don't think there's, somebody asked about data centers. Jim Bates mentioned data centers. I don't believe there's a plan for data centers in orbit. There's a huge challenge with orbital computing, is that if you have something like a data center, generates a lot of heat, and it's very hard to dissipate heat in space. You might think, well, it's really cold up there. Yeah, but there's no molecules to absorb the heat and take it away. It's a vacuum. So it's actually very hard to dissipate heat from something in space. So I don't think data centers are going to happen. Atrax says competitive pricing. You know, competitive for who? It's not. Elon has said this is not intended for urban environments. It's intended primarily for people who don't already have good internet access, and they're relying on satellite connections from a much further distance, so that the latency in particular is much slower. So it would be nice if Starlink ended up costing less. Certainly, if I want to be a customer, I would like that. But I don't think that's in the plan. And if it is $100 a month for people who live in remote locations, for people who are on boats, for people who are on airplanes, $100 a month is cheap. So it's very competitive for that purpose. I don't know how data centers in orbit would work. I think that's going to be really hard. I know they're working with Microsoft. I don't know the advantage of putting a data center in orbit. I don't know if I buy that. So I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about on Starlink. So we can talk about all this later. There's next Starlink comes up again with Mars. There was this. I think it's funny. You can tell me what you think. There was this story that this is typical media, overstating the case, trying to make it, trying to exaggerate something that happened. But a lot of media picked up on this. There's these headlines that Elon Musk will not recognize Earth laws on Mars, and it's in the terms of service. So let's go to the terms of service. So the key language here is for services provided on Mars or in transit to Mars via Starship or other colonization spacecraft. It's an interesting little thing to drop in there. The parties recognize Mars as a free planet and that no Earth-based government has authority or sovereignty over Martian activities. Disputes will be settled through self-governing principles. So a lot of people took this differently than I did. I took it as a joke. I don't think this is intended to be serious. And the reason it's not intended to be serious is because who thinks the colonization is starting soon? I mean, yes, we're hoping that we're going to see humans launch to Mars in the next 4 to 6 years. That would be nice. A colony isn't starting in 4 to 6 years. 4 to 6 years is, something is landing on maybe 2 to 10 humans are landing. I'm thinking 10. A crew of maybe, 5 to 10 humans are landing on Mars to start trying to set something up. But this is nowhere near colonization. So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a joke and the media didn't get it. And it's a good way of getting media attention, I guess. Good for branding. The reason why I think this is irrelevant, even if you tried to take it seriously, the reason why it's irrelevant, and for those who don't know, I am an attorney. I'm mostly retired attorney, and I'm not claiming I was ever very good at it. Some people think I was good at it, but whatever. Is, the odds are that by the time someone who has a Starlink contract lands on Mars and then this provision, or was on their way to Mars and this provision might apply, the contract is going to be superseded by a new contract. These contracts get changed every year or two. So, we're not launching any humans to Mars for 4 to 6 years, I think. It's 2020 now. 2024 right now looks pretty optimistic for sending humans. So we're probably looking at 2026, 2027. I forget how the window goes. Fred, I think we could see humans on Mars in 2026 or 2027. I don't remember what the home and transfer window is. I think it goes into 2027 is the next one after 2024. So 2027, 2029, maybe there's humans on Mars. But the odds of those individuals who are on the early Mars missions having Starlink contracts that would then apply to their visit to Mars is pretty small. Because there's going to be, what are the odds that person's going to be a Starlink customer? They're probably going to be either a SpaceX employee or a NASA employee, and then this isn't going to be relevant. So really, the Mars colony starts maybe in the mid-2030s. Maybe. That's up, I'm hoping that we start seeing efforts to colonize Mars in the 2030s. At that point, maybe it happens, but between 2020 and 2030, the odds are this contract language is going to change anyway. So this contract doesn't matter. Sorry. So what else we got here? Elon is let's see. Elon is a big science fiction reader. He realizes Mars will have one or more governments and its own laws. Sorry, let's see how that looks. Okay, good. So on Mars, do you prefer one big country or 2,000 small countries? I don't really have an opinion on that. I don't think that much about what's Martian society going to be like. I think that's something that's going to be developed over time. Anyway, that's the terms of service, and we saw the headline. So this was an interesting little detail. Somebody asked or mentioned to Elon about how they want to go to Mars because the lower gravity would mean it would reduce or eliminate back pain. I thought that was a pretty interesting thing to comment on. Sorry. Cut my hair, by the way. Woohoo! Elon mentioned that there would be fewer heart attacks. Now, I don't think we really know this. The heart would have less there would be less strain on the heart muscle because it wouldn't have to pump the blood as hard to get it to your brain. I don't think we really know what the long-term effects of low gravity are going to be, but it's kind of interesting to say that. So, CM asks a great question here. Let me address this question. How in hell will they ship so much equipment to make a small city on Mars? This is a great question. This is why Starship matters. Previously, the cost of sending any kind of mission to Mars was outrageously expensive and you couldn't send a large mass. You couldn't send a lot of tonnage to Mars. The problem is, first of all, the booster that you sent up to get whatever, there's like a 3-stage process. You have to get something up into orbit, which requires a booster in a second stage. And then whatever's on the second stage has to get, maybe there's a third stage that goes to Mars. This is a very different approach that SpaceX is planning. So when in the earlier version, you launch the booster up there and then it crashes into the ocean. You got to build a new one for your next trip. SpaceX's plan is you bring the booster back and you can use it again 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. So you're saving a huge amount of money on the cost of boosters. You're paying for fuel and that's it. And the fuel they're going to be using, methane, is going to be cheap. Methane and liquid oxygen. So if you recover the booster, you save a lot of money. If you recover the second stage, which is Starship, you save a ridiculous amount of money, and the cost of the mission becomes the cost of fuel. So the plan is to launch Starship, use Super Heavy to boost Starship on its way to orbit. Starship gets itself the rest of the way into orbit. And then while Starship is in orbit, before it heads to Mars, tanker Starships are launched to refuel the Starship that's going to Mars. So with this approach, a Starship that's not planning to come back, that's not going to be able to refuel on Mars and not going to be able to come back, I believe would be able to carry about 100 tons of cargo to Mars. And the cost really isn't that high. I mean, you're talking, it's probably $5 or $10 million, but it's not billions. We're dramatically lowering the cost of delivering a ton of cargo to Mars. That's SpaceX is dramatically lowering the cost of sending a ton of cargo to Mars. So because of that, you're now able to bring lots of cargo to Mars because the cost per ton is low. So you're able to deliver a lot more cargo. And then hopefully once we get something established on Mars, we can start using what's called in situ resources that are already on Mars. We can use water on Mars for the purposes of the colony. We can use sunlight on Mars to generate electricity with solar panels that we deliver. That's going to be a big part of the adventure, is what can the colonists do to make use of what's on Mars? Can they mine? Can they build a factory? What can be done on Mars? Keep in mind, the atmosphere is not going to be breathable anytime soon. Probably not for hundreds of years, if ever. So it's going to be a very challenging environment, but it's a tremendous opportunity. So, sorry, there's one other thing I wanted to show you. One of the interesting things about Starlink is there's discussion of there being, and I think that's the point of the terms of service, is that there might be Starlink service on Mars, that SpaceX would launch Starlink satellites to orbit Mars to provide internet access, phone access, whatever, to the people on the Martian surface. And then the next question is, well, how is the Martian colony communicating with Earth? And that brings us to my next thing, which I may make a whole video about this. I'm curious to see what you guys think about this, so please tell me what you think about this bit here. Okay, so this is a very rough picture, and probably somewhat inaccurate picture, of the Earth, Moon, Mars, Venus, and Mercury orbits around the Sun. These are the 4 inner planets' orbits around the Sun. And for the purposes of what I'm about to talk about, Earth and Mars at their closest get to about 40 million miles apart from each other. When they're at the same point, if this is the sun and they're going around the circle, when they're both at the same point around the circle, great, they might be 40 million miles apart. When they're on opposite sides of the sun, they can be up to 200. So that's this line, the blue line here, shows when they're on opposite sides of the sun, they're 250 million miles apart, which is far. Okay, 40 million miles is already far. 250 million miles is a lot farther. When they're on opposite sides of the sun with the sun in the way, you can see why that might make communication hard. So some of the questions that I've seen come up are, how does the Mars colony communicate with Earth? And I've seen people talking about, well, you set up a big laser on Mars and you send communication that way. I think this is going to be a really interesting challenge, is how well will the Martian colony communicate with Earth? And I don't know that there's a good answer to it, I have an idea that I'm going to throw out to you that you can tell me I'm crazy about. So this is that same picture. I took out the lines and I added a blue dotted line and an orange dotted line, or beige. And this is meant to represent an idea, a possible, I'm not sure it's a good solution, but it's a possible solution to communicating between the Martian colony and Earth. So the idea is, if we can throw thousands of satellites into orbit around the Earth, could we throw thousands of satellites into orbits around the sun that are concentric orbits that are closer to Earth or closer to Mars? And the idea would be, maybe you have 120 satellites in orbit, you know, Mars is about, Earth is 92 million miles from the sun, and Mars is, I think, 140 million miles from the sun. So maybe you have one that's 130 million miles, 120 million miles, 110 million miles, 100 million miles. And now you're shortening the distance from Mars to the first satellite, to the next satellite, to the next satellite, to Earth. And, you know, to some extent, it's communicate. When they're close to each other, now instead of having to go 40 million miles, maybe you only have to go in 5 million mile hops or 10 million mile hops. So you're able to, that communication, and the point is, the power that you would need to send your communication from Mars to Earth at 40 million miles probably isn't that bad, but it's still big. Is it possible that a Starlink type satellite, or a network of Starlink type satellites that are in orbit around the sun, in between Earth and Mars distance orbits, would they be able to enhance that communication? I mean, it's not going to enhance necessarily the latency. It's hard to deliver a quality signal over that distance, but if you had shorter distances, would a satellite network like this enable better communication between the Earth and Mars? Especially when you go around the sun, you know, when it's on the direct opposite side of the sun, there's no, you know, line of sight, and you're probably going to have, you know, I don't know whether it's a 3-day window or a week-long window where you literally would not be able to communicate by line of sight. I don't know how long it takes for them to get out of each other's way. But what was the 3D point? You can have a satellite in orbit perpendicular to Earth and Mars orbit. I don't know how that would work. If you could send me an email explaining that, that's kind of interesting. I think that would be, my gut tells me that that would take things that would go further out of your way if you had a perpendicular orbit. I'm not sure that I buy that. Quantum entanglement, okay, I don't think quantum entanglement's going to work for high volume communication, but we'll see. So, you know, how many satellites would you need? Now, one of the things I don't know is Starlink satellites in Earth orbit are not that far from each other. You know, maybe they're 10,000 miles apart, maybe they're 5,000 miles apart, maybe they're even closer than that. Now we're talking about the Starlink satellites being 1 million miles apart, 5 million miles apart. Do they have the resources to be able to communicate with each other from that distance? I think, you know, we're talking about lasers. I don't think that's going to be that hard. So would that work? I think that's an interesting question. So I hope, and maybe you would be able to use some Lagrange points to make this work as well. I'm not sure exactly how all this works, but I think this is a really interesting concept. Satellite is too small to orbit around the sun, will be deorbited by planets. Well, I'm not so sure about that, Fred. Fred says that the Starlink satellites are too small to orbit around the sun. I don't know why you say that, and the reality is that Starlink satellites have ion engines. Krypton ion engines, so I think they would work. I think it would work fine. Venus is a gravity booster. Anyway, so that was an idea. I might make a video about this topic. If you have some thoughts on this, please put a comment. Likely to always have one good link, only need 2 to 3 relay satellites in the right solar orbit. Transmission fairly easy, delay not important since too long anyway. Yeah, no, I don't think this network of satellites helps with the latency. If anything, it might actually slow the latency slightly because you're not going a direct path. I think the satellites help make it easier to deliver a volume of communication because they shorten the distance from point to point. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe especially when you're talking about on the other side of the sun, But, you know, John, you're right. If you could send me an email, maybe there's a discussion about this already. I just thought this was an interesting idea, and it might not cost that much to get this network of satellites into orbit, and it might enhance other communication in the solar system. So, okay, well, thank you. You know, it sounds like some people think I'm wrong, and it's not necessary, so we'll move on. So, Tesla news. Let's see what we got here. Oh, we'll start with autopilot. Somebody asked about autopilot, so we'll start with autopilot. There was a thread on Twitter. Elon thanked the autopilot team, saying, doing neural nets without testing them against reality has led some groups to overestimate what they're doing. Reality is the hardest sim. This is really important. This is why full self-driving autopilot being in beta release matters. For those who don't know, full self-driving, a new version was released, which has the software was rewritten, a foundational rewrite, which should increase learning speed. The software should learn faster. It has to do with something called 4D labeling or 3D labeling. It used to be that the car's driving along and it's got 8 cameras around it, and it's got sonar, radar, whatever. When there was an incident that would be sent back to the home office, there's people whose job is labeling, and whatever the incident is, they would be looking at 8 different cameras, still images over, let's say, a half second or a second, and their job was to label objects. The foundational rewrite, now they get a 3D video, so effectively 4D representation of whatever the car saw, whatever's around the car, and the labelers can label much quicker because they label something in a 4D time. They do one job of labeling an object and it's labeled, instead of having to label it on 8 different photos taken 10 or 20 times, so hundreds of photos. So it supposedly increases the labeling or reduces labeling time 10x or better. So that's a big change. I think there's some other significant changes in the foundational rewrite. So, but Elon said, you know, hey, it's great to do this stuff in simulations, but now we're out in the real world and we're learning a lot. So somebody asked that, it said it feels 10x better. How does it enhance actual improvements on the road? And Elon says we measure this in intervention probability. The update results in perhaps 1/3 fewer interventions. Interventions are when somebody's driving the car and they take their hands off the wheel, they let autopilot drive, and then they see something and they think the autopilot is making a bad decision and they intervene. They grab the wheel, they hit the brakes, and that gets sent up to Tesla home office to figure out, okay, what happened here? How can it do better? Which involves labeling and it involves training. There's other things going on there that involve some significant computer science. So we already have a 1/3 improvement, which is great. And as Elon says, many of the improvements consist of fixing silly bugs versus grand eureka moments. In other words, there are little glitches that they caught that needed to be fixed, and that made a big difference. But it's not one big difference, it's a bunch of little things, which is what we're really expecting the learning process to be. And then Kristen Netton asked about how long it's going to be till we see more improvements. And Elon said faults will never be 0, but at some point the probability of fault will be far lower than that of the average human. I'm going to talk about the average human in a second. I just want to finish this thread here. And then somebody asked, how fast do you think the updates will roll out? And Elon is expecting updates to roll out every 5 to 10 days. This is amazing. We're talking about, I'm going to take this off the screen now. We're talking about car software being updated like amazingly fast. This is Tesla and Starship and SpaceX both. Their approach is rapid iterative design, rapid iterative engineering. You try something, you basically run it till it breaks, then you edit, you redo it and do it again and do it again and do it again, and it gets better and better and better. And by doing the updates quicker, it improves quicker. So, and if you're on YouTube or Twitter, I've been seeing a lot of people like Kim Packett and Kristen Netton and others, Tesla Raj, I think. A lot of people are posting videos of what it looks like when, I think Holmar's blog has been posting videos of what it looks like driving the full self-driving beta. It's looking great. So we're seeing a lot of progress there. I did want to talk about, what did I want to talk about there? Oh, the average human. I think this is an important question. I think a lot of people, I think even, you know, I'm this huge Elon Musk fan. but I think even Elon gets some things wrong. And this is something I think he has wrong. He refers to the average human. I don't think the goal needs to be, I mean, the goal is to be better than not just the average human, but be better than the best human. But I think there's this important question is, when does society let a self-driving car drive? How good does it have to be before we let a self-driving car drive on its own? And Elon seems to be talking about it has to be significantly better than the average human. And, maybe a lot better, maybe 10 times or 100 times better than the average human. And I actually have a very different opinion on this. I think as soon as it's better than the worst humans that we allow to drive, then it should be allowed to drive. My family, we have a 15-year-old that we are currently teaching to drive. And I love her, and she's pretty good. But believe it or not, the Tesla full self-driving is more capable than either of my children. I have an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. And Tesla's self-driving software is already more capable. And what I mean by that in particular is my kids won't drive on an interstate highway. They're not comfortable driving on an interstate highway. A lot of people are uncomfortable driving on interstate highways. Tesla full self-driving loves interstate highways. Does really good on that. It has different scenarios where it has more trouble. But I think that it's going to take a while before I would be comfortable letting it drive on its own, but I think it's making progress, and this is an important substantive point here. There are already a lot of bad human drivers on the road. If full self-driving is allowed to drive on its own, let's say in a robo-taxi network, and the first people to use it and stop driving are people who are the worst drivers. So, people with 2 drunk driving convictions, 15 and 16-year-olds, people with suspended licenses, people with histories of multiple accidents. We have a pretty good idea of who the worst drivers are. And if our system works correctly, and I'm not saying it does, if our system works correctly, it should be more expensive for those people to drive themselves than it should be for safe driving. I think I'm a safe driver. I have a clean driving record, clean driving history, don't cause accidents. Anybody over the age of roughly 25 who's been driving since they were 16 is generally a very safe, with exceptions, people with clean driving records over the age of 25 are very safe drivers. And we pay less for car insurance. And if you have better credit, it turns out if you have better credit, you're less likely to have an accident. So it's cheaper for you to own a car because you can get the car loan cheaper, and your insurance costs less because you have better credit. So the people who are the worst drivers should be costing the most for them to drive on a per mile basis. So if you get robo-taxi running at $1 a mile, and it's safer than, let's say, the bottom 10% of drivers, and that 10%, or everyone who stops driving and rides robo-taxi is in that bottom 10%, well, then it's safer. It actually made the road safer, even though it's only at the bottom 10%. Let's see. When you get a cab, your life's in someone's hands. Let's see. So that's something I've talked about. If we let below average drivers drive, then why aren't we letting full self-driving drive? If it's better than below average human drivers, we already let below average human drivers drive. I don't think the target has to be 10 times better than the average driver, is what I'm trying to say. And this is why this matters, okay? Let's suppose it's 25th percentile. In other words, 75% of human drivers are better than full self-driving at a certain moment in time. But it's better than the bottom 25%. And let's suppose we release robo-taxis into the world, and the bottom 10% stop driving, and they start riding in robo-taxis. Well, you're going to have fewer accidents in that scenario than you're going to have in the scenario where you hold full self-driving back and don't let robo-taxis operate. So once it gets to average, I think the reason that Elon wants to wait until it's much better than average is because he doesn't want to give it a bad name, because the average human driver really isn't that good. He wants it to be so good that we don't see accidents, and I would like to see that. But I just think this is an important issue that people don't talk about enough. And if we had a rational society, unfortunately we don't, if we had a rational society, once it was better than the worst human drivers, we let the worst human drivers drive, we should let it drive. When I was a kid, going on highway was scary. We drove on low traffic highways. So thanks for admitting that, Jim. You have more than one DUI. Jim, I'll ask you this question. Are your insurance rates higher because of your past DUIs? If your insurance rates are higher because of your past DUIs, then there's been a decision that you are a dangerous driver and the cost of you to drive is higher. If the DUIs were a long time ago, then that's gone and that shouldn't be affecting your insurance rates if it's, 10, 20 years ago. But somebody who has recent DUIs, their driving and their car insurance rates go up. I'm a drunk driving defense lawyer. I haven't got one case pending now, but I've handled hundreds of drunk driving cases, and people who get convicted of drunk driving usually see their insurance rates triple or quadruple, which means their cost per mile goes up and they're incentivized to ride in a robo-taxi instead. Let's see. Okay, so let's move on from that. I have a lot of Tesla news, so we're going to get into it. One of the big pieces of news that I thought was important was, and this is today, there's indications. So I'm a big proponent of lithium iron phosphate batteries. Elon talked about lithium iron phosphate at Battery Day. Elon and Drew talked about iron phosphate at Battery Day. Iron phosphate has a lot of advantages over the nickel-based battery cells. A particular advantage is that iron phosphate costs less. Another particular advantage is that it has greater depth of charge. You can charge, let me take this off the screen for a second. With a nickel-based battery, you're generally better off in terms of the life of the battery, the long-term life of the battery, if you don't discharge below 40 and you charge up to 60% of charge. And, you can go between 20% of charge and 80% of charge, and that's you're going to have pretty good long-term performance on your nickel-based battery with a Tesla. With lithium iron phosphate, it's much more capable of handling deeper depth of discharge, going from 0 to 100 basically, or 5 to 95, without impairing the long-term life of the battery. So if an LFP battery, a lithium iron phosphate battery, has 250 miles of range and a nickel-based battery has 300 miles of range, practically speaking, the lithium iron phosphate battery really has more practical range because you don't mind going deeper into the depth of discharge. You use more of the 250 than you use of the 300, so they're much more comparable. So the other big thing about lithium iron phosphate is it has higher cycle life in the first place. So with nickel-based chemistries, I think they're around 1,000 to 2,000 cycles, and maybe the new chemistry that they're working on is closer to 3,000 or 4,000 cycle life, which you go to 0, down to 0, you go back to 100, you go down to 0 again, that's a cycle. Do that 3,000 times, your battery's done. With iron phosphate batteries, we've seen 6,000 cycle life. They may get to 10,000 or 15,000 cycle life. Those batteries are going to last forever. So they're less expensive, they have better cycle life, they have better depth of discharge. So that's really key. So getting back to this, now there's an indication that the lithium iron phosphate batteries also charge faster. And I'm going to show you some, let's see. This is can I put these on the screen at the same time? I won't put them on the screen at the same time. So this is a Tesla Model 3 nickel cobalt aluminum in China. I need my glasses for this. This is a Tesla Model 3 nickel cobalt aluminum battery. I believe these both have the same range. And this car's battery charged from 40 to 99 in an hour and 2 minutes, in 62 minutes. And the rate of charging was, when it was at 40%, the rate of charging was 488 kilometers per hour, and then 99 kilometers per hour when it was close to 100. It slows down. These batteries slow down in their charging when they get close to 100. So that's that one. Now we look at this one. This is the lithium iron phosphate battery, and it charged from 41 to 99, so almost the same depth of charge change in 28 plus 42 minutes. So 20 minutes quicker. It was able to charge from 41 to 99, 20 minutes quicker than the nickel cobalt aluminum batteries chemistry. And the charge rate, you can see 519 kilometers an hour instead of 488 kilometers per hour. And maybe I don't have this. Oh, okay, here we go. And 68 kilometers an hour at the top versus, I think it was under 30 kilometers an hour at the top. So the iron phosphate battery charges quicker. And the chemistry reasons why one battery charges quicker than other, I'm not competent to discuss that. A lot of people think it has to do with heating, and it is true. Excuse me. Sorry about that. A lot of people think that the reason that lithium iron phosphate batteries do better on charging is because of heating, that lithium iron phosphate batteries don't heat up as much. They don't have as many problems with heat as nickel, cobalt, aluminum batteries or nickel-based chemistries. I don't remember who I saw talking about that. One of the issues that creates problems with charge speeds and battery life it's called anode plating. There's something going on in the chemistry inside the cell, and if you do it wrong, you get some plating on the anode and it makes it harder for the ions to exchange, and that can affect the long-term battery capacity and life of the battery. So that was an interesting detail that I thought people would want to see, is that I think that, it's funny because people are really excited about the nickel-based chemistries that Tesla's been talking about, the new 4680 cell. There's a lot of great improvements. I think that the lithium iron phosphate is coming into its own, and it has this huge advantage that it's less expensive and iron is abundant. We have this problem with, Elon's been making jokes about please mine more nickel. In order to build a large volume of nickel-based batteries, we need a lot of nickel, and currently that much nickel is not being mined. The nickel's in the Earth's core. It's not like it's in the Earth's crust. It's there. It's not like there's a shortage of nickel availability in the Earth's crust. It's just that the mining isn't there yet to be able to produce enough nickel in volume. And there was, I didn't prepare this. I don't remember this week, but there's apparently indications that Tesla is going to be doing nickel mining or some kind of nickel contract or even a factory in Indonesia, which is something I predicted in a previous video. So, but because iron phosphate is cheaper, because iron is ubiquitous, and there's never going to be a shortage of iron or phosphate to make these batteries, I think iron phosphate, when Elon and Drew talked about 20 terawatt hours in 2030, I think 80% of that 20 terawatt hours is going to be iron phosphate batteries, because it's less expensive. And for relatively wealthy people like myself, paying an extra $5,000 for an extra 100 miles of range matters. But if you're in poorer countries, or if you're doing grid storage where it doesn't matter, saving a little bit of money on the battery by going to iron phosphate makes a big difference for a lot of people. Interesting. Somebody says that the new battery cells have 20,000 mic cycles, if not min-maxed. I don't think we're going to know about that yet. So the people who really know are in short supply. Thanks, Jim. I agree with that. So let's move on to the other detail that's really important with batteries is both LG Chem and Panasonic both announced that they are building the 4680 cells for Tesla. I don't believe they're building the high nickel-based cells. I think they're probably both making the nickel manganese cells. But I think it's pretty clear that within 2 years, maybe 3, Tesla wants to standardize all its vehicles on the new 4680 cell format. And one of the keys to making that work is Tesla needs its suppliers on board. Tesla's plan is to only make the high nickel chemistry that they talked about on Battery Day, and suppliers will make the other batteries. So LG Chem and Panasonic are two of Tesla's. So let's talk about LG Chem first here. LG Chem said it's developing new form factor cylindrical batteries which will boost energy density 5-fold and power by 6-fold without elaborating, and those are the exact numbers that Tesla talked about on Battery Day. So that was LG Chem. Panasonic is working on a new battery cell for Tesla as they move forward with their partnership. We have considerable know-how for that battery, the CFO said. We started working on it immediately after Battery Day and are also preparing to set up a prototype production line in parallel. So I think we can expect that Panasonic is going to be making the nickel manganese battery cells in 4680 format in Nevada, at Giga Nevada, soon. I think they're already working on setting up a production line or maybe a pilot line. My prediction or my sense is that Tesla is going to work with Panasonic and LG Chem and CATL to help them implement the technology that Tesla developed for nickel manganese and iron phosphate cells, so that come 2022, when Tesla's planning to have produced 100 gigawatt hours of high nickel batteries, there'll be another 100 gigawatt hours of nickel manganese and iron phosphate batteries or more available from suppliers. And this is what is needed to enable the very, very fast growth that Tesla is aiming for, so that we can get out to 2030 and have Tesla producing 3 terawatt hours of cells and suppliers producing another 3 terawatt hours of cells. And that's when I talked in a recent video about Tesla going to $40,000 a share in 2030. If they get 6 terawatt hours of cells and they put them into products and sell them at the prices we think they're roughly doing, this is what's going to happen. No. So Calvin says people tried to take the wind out of Tesla's sails by saying suppliers will do the same. Yes, Tesla wants suppliers to do the same. I think they're going to help the suppliers do the same in exchange for long-term supply contracts, so Tesla gets the cells that it needs. And the battery companies are going to make above normal profits for battery companies. Well below normal profit margins for Tesla, but above normal profits for them. So this is a win-win scenario. You know, we talk all the time about competition and there's all this heated competition. This is a win-win. The battery manufacturers get to get a higher volume customer, and they're making better than previous margins because Tesla's going to help them develop these cell lines. The investment cost of building these cell lines is going to be less. That was part of Battery Day. They're going to be able to make more money on less investment, so that's great for them. Tesla's going to have the supply of batteries they need to be able to produce the products that they want to sell at lower cost with higher margins. So this is a great deal for both Tesla suppliers and Tesla itself. Very, very exciting. So that was the LG Chem version. And the Panasonic version, they're doing it. And Panasonic said, we're working on this. We started working on a meeting. So we're seeing great progress there. Okay, so I think that's the Tesla news I had. Yes, I think Elon is going to be a trillionaire. Well, the stock will go to 40,000, but it won't be right away. That's my view. Okay. 69K in 2042 for the meme. I like that. That's a good one, Matt. I like that. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about, let's see. I'm going to go to universal basic income next, which I think a lot of people want to talk about. I got a lot of comments on my video, but just really quick, I want to see if there's any other comments on SpaceX, Starship, Starlink, Mars, or Tesla, and then we'll move into UBI. 4680 format is required for new casting manufacturing. Yes, I agree that the new design is going to work better with 4680 cells. The new, I think, by the way, Graham talked about this. So there's the casting manufacturing design. There's also Cybertruck, which I don't know, and I'm curious to see what people think here. Does Cybertruck have castings? I don't think it does. I think Cybertruck is a completely different design, and it's got an exoskeleton, and the structural battery pack connects to the exoskeleton. And I think the wheels and, the hardware for the wheels and the motors connect to the exoskeleton or the structural battery pack or both. Hi, Warren. Did you see that the Chinese government has created a law involving EVs with swappable batteries that does not work in Tesla's favor? I did not see that. Elements, how's your cyber cabin doing? Any progress? Let me do a cyber cabin. I did talk about cyber cabin earlier. So the lot that I haven't started anything close to building cyber cabin yet, but I did learn a bit about what's going on with cyber cabin. So number one, there are several lots around the lot where I'm going to build cyber cabin. I have 3 of my friends here, very close to where I live here in South Florida, who are interested in buying other lots near mine. So we're looking into whether other lots are available. I've got one that's definitely available that somebody might buy. So hopefully we get 3 or 4 lots together. That's going to make it easier for us to build all at once. It's going to make it easier for us to do things like share one Starlink for 3 properties, because we probably don't need our own Starlink for a property. We may be able to share costs in bringing electric into the properties if we have, but it's supposed to cost, I was told it's going to cost about $15,000 to bring electric in. If we split that over 3 properties, and it's $5,000 a piece. If we need it, I think we're all planning on doing solar anyway, so I don't know if we're going to need it, but it's not bad to have the grid if you can get it. Then I'm still working on how I'm going to do it. I'm pretty close to deciding I'm going to do a steel building. I don't think I've raised enough money in my half GoFundMe attempt with Patreon, so I don't think that's going to happen. Let's see. So that's a basic update. There's not a lot of news on Cybercabin yet. Ed Kane, my guess is Cybertruck exoskeleton is folded and structural battery pack is casted, wired, and bolted into the exoskeleton. That's what I think, Ed. For Starlink, they officially bid against the $20 billion contract for Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Yes, I read that. I don't think that's hugely important. I don't know how much revenue that's going to generate or whether that's how valuable that contract is, but it is interesting. Let's see. Why you need a building for. So Cybercabin is number 1, a fun project, and number 2, I live in South Florida where we have bad hurricanes, and if a bad hurricane hits where you live, it can make it very, very unpleasant to live where you live for a couple weeks, if not longer. So having a place to escape to is a nice thing to have, and this Cybercabin would be 2 hours from my home, so it'd be easy to get there. Let's see. Look for stock leads on other sites. I don't know what that's about. Robotaxi Network live by the end of 2024, Chris Anderson asks. I believe Robotaxi Network will be live before the end of 2022. So, all right. So let me jump into UBI, Universal Basic Income. So I posted a video last night on my YouTube channel, on this channel, where I contend, and I'm expecting a healthy argument here. No, I would be able to afford the Cybercabin with or without UBI because I have money. I don't have that much money, but I have money. So I contend that universal basic income is a terrible idea. It sounds great. Lots of people love the idea. The video I posted last night, which I would encourage you to watch, is the last video I did before this video you're watching now. I have, Elon Musk has talked about universal basic income. Andrew Yang, who's pictured here. This is Andrew Yang right here. He was a presidential candidate in 2020, who's, by the way, Andrew Yang is basically he's not from my hometown, he's from the next town over, outside Albany, New York, Schenectady, New York. He's from Niskayuna, I'm from Guilderland. He is this big proponent of universal basic income, and I think universal basic income is a dangerous and terrible idea. So I made my video, and I talked about a lot of different things in the video, but if you're curious about where my original contribution is in that video, about 32 minutes in, I talk about something called the Law of Comparative Advantage. So the idea that Yang and Musk talk about as the reason why we need universal basic income is the machines are going to get so good at everything that there won't be anything left for humans to do. And I disagree with that premise. And Jim, I agree with you about the fraud and the dumb idea and all those other things, but just starting with the premise is the machines are going to get so good at everything that there will be nothing left for humans to do. And there is a concept in economics called the Law of Comparative Advantage. It started with an economist named David Ricardo back in the 1800s. And it relates to international trade theory. So it's country A trading with country B. And you can think about it as the machines trading with the humans, or more likely the people who own the machines trading with the humans who don't own machines, as two separate countries in the same context. So what Ricardo showed, and what I included in the video, was an explanation from the Khan Academy, from Salman Khan himself, explaining comparative advantage, that suppose you have a country that makes everything more efficiently. Country A makes everything better than country B. It uses less resources, it's able to produce more than country B. So the way people thought about it, which is the way people think about AI and humans, is, well, there would be no reason to trade between the countries, to trade between the humans and the machines, because the machines make everything better. The successful country makes everything better. And what Ricardo showed, and you can see it it starts around 32 minutes in yesterday's video. There's still reason to trade. When the people who are less productive produce anyway, and focus on the things that they produce relatively better. Okay, so the machines are absolutely better at everything, but we're particularly good at this one thing within the sphere of what we're kind of good at. If we focus on the things that we're kind of good at, our contribution is good enough that we add value. And basically, it's a very troubling mindset that Andrew Yang has, and even Elon has. I'm like the biggest. If you guys know me, you pay attention to me. I'm the biggest Elon Musk fan in the world. I run an Elon Musk fan club on Facebook, which is not very. It's got a lot of people, but it's not very lively, and it's a lot of junk. People try to post a lot of junk that I moderate it, and I don't let anybody post junk. So it doesn't get a lot of interaction. Okay, Jonathan Root says, Warren, you are arguing that AI will never become better than humans in everything. No, that is not what I'm arguing. I am arguing that even if AI gets better than humans at everything, as long as we are relatively better at something, we should continue producing what we're good at. And we will still be adding value, and there's still a point in humans producing things. Warren got a new camera. No, this is an old camera. I'm just improving the setup over time. You claim to understand exponential growth, but don't see how people can't get out of the way fast enough. So this is actually one of the dangerous things. I haven't said why it's dangerous, so let's talk about why it's dangerous. Why it's dangerous is when you listen to Andrew Yang and you listen to other people talking about humans. Andrew Yang was talking about truck drivers and coal miners and saying they can't be trained to do anything else. He's basically talking from up on high on the mountain, looking down at those poor dumb apes and saying they're worthless and they're valueless and they can't produce anything. And that's a dangerous mentality. And the reason why it's dangerous is it's easy to go from, we have to take care of those poor animals, to, gee, you know, those animals are consuming a lot of resources, we should get rid of them. If you don't see how dangerous, it's basically dehumanizing people you think aren't good enough to produce. And it's wrong, because everyone can do something. Not everyone. Are there people who have serious mental health problems? Are there people who are quadriplegics with brain injuries who can't do anything? Sure. There's a small population who can't do anything. Night Trekker says crony capitalism ruins your logic. Universal basic income is more crony capitalism. If you think this is so one of my big issues that I think no one else criticizes, so my first criticism of universal basic income is the law of comparative advantage says your premise is wrong. People can still produce and still add value even after the machines are better at everything. The second point is Andrew Yang has this pure notion of universal basic income. Everybody gets $1,000 a month. We eliminate all other benefits. If you're, we eliminate 126 welfare programs, and it runs very efficiently because it's not bureaucratic. Have you seen Congress? Have you ever paid attention to what happens in Congress? Nothing gets through pure. It's not going to go through pure. They're not going to eliminate 126 programs. They're not going to eliminate one program. And then Yang talks about this program. And he says, well, if people are receiving more benefits than the $1,000, then they don't get the $1,000. And he refers to Social Security. Do you pay any attention to how politics works in America? You're going to come up with a benefit program that gives $1,000 to everyone, and you're going to cut off anybody on Social Security from this benefit when everyone on Social Security votes. Seriously, I'm going to ask this. Does anyone believe that that would get through Congress? Right now, I'm asking you. Does anyone believe that Andrew Yang's plan, that people who get more than $1,000 from Social Security a month are going to be cut out and they're not going to get anything from this program? Does anyone watching this think that that's going to go through? I don't know about the paperclip theory. Well, AI will be a better Congress and make it pure. AI is not going to be elected to Congress. Yes, Jim, it's always screwing somebody. Well, Jim, his plan is to use value-added tax, which is a sales tax. Does anybody want to pay triple the sales tax you're paying now? I agree with you 99%. I feel your base argument. This is stupid. We were already at a point where machines were training machines. Okay, so... So So far, I don't see anybody disagreeing with me. I asked a specific question. I'm going to ask it again. Does anyone think a plan is going to go through Congress? Andrew Yang's plan is you get $1,000 a month, but if you get more than $1,000 a month from Social Security, you don't get any of the $1,000. Does anyone think that's going through Congress? And this is an important thing here. People like the idea of universal basic income because they like the idea of getting a check for $1,000 a month. If you're over 65, you're not getting it. If you're collecting Social Security right now under Andrew Yang's plan, you're not getting it. He did say that. It's in my video. It's in my video from yesterday. He absolutely said it. He said anybody who's getting federal benefits that add up to more than $1,000 don't get anything. It's in the video yesterday. Never because they're members of Congress that see your position. Scott Tisdale, it's in my... Watch the video from yesterday. Andrew Yang says it. He said it in the Joe Rogan interview. It is his plan. Maybe he changed his plan. It's what he said on the Joe Rogan interview. And if it's not his plan, okay, if it's not his plan and everyone on Social Security gets it, well, then it costs a lot more than what he said. All of a sudden, it's not so cheap. All of a sudden, he kept making these... It was in this part, Joe Rogan was asking him how much it was going to cost. How are you going to pay for this $3 trillion? And he says, well, it's really going to be $1.8 trillion because we're not going to have to pay these people. And he said, we're not paying anyone under 18. Is that universal basic income if anyone under 18 doesn't get it? It's not universal anymore. If you have a family of 5 with 5 kids and you're not getting anything out of... None of your kids get anything, all you have to do is look at the COVID cash we got. My family, I got $1,200, my wife got $1,200, and my younger child got $500. So the kids got paid. It's a fantasy. Let's see. So far, I think one person has agreed that Congress won't go along with it and no one else is answering. And this is the thing. So if you are a passionate believer in universal basic income, okay, and you believe in Andrew Yang's plan, and you can tell me that's not his plan. It's what he said to Joe Rogan, okay? That's what he said to Joe Rogan to justify his plan. So if you agree, okay, if you say that's not his plan or that's not the UBI plan, well, then it's going to cost a lot more. How are you going to fund it? You can't... But plain and simple, I don't see anybody saying it will go through Congress that way. So if you agree that it's not going to get through Congress that way and the seniors are going to get their $1,000, well, what are the other things in the plan that aren't going to go through? Right? That's not the only thing. And then, here's another question. Andrew Yang says it's $1,000 a month. Is that really enough? Does anyone... Think about this. The Democrats talk about living wage. They want a minimum wage of $15 an hour. Well, $15 an hour times 40 hours a week is $600 a week. Times 4 weeks is $2,400, but the average month has more than 4 weeks, so let's call it $2,500 a month. So you're only going to give people $1,000 a month when you're telling me that living wage is $2,500 a month? Can we just admit that the UBI would really be $2,500 a month? Does anybody who supports UBI disagree that ultimately UBI would have to be at least $2,500 a month? I'm going to look at the comments. Do you agree that it's not enough to live on? We've said the people who support UBI, the Democratic Party is the one that generally supports UBI. If you believe that $1,000 is enough, then how come you're saying we need a $15 an hour minimum wage? What do you mean it's the starting position? It's supposed to be enough for people to live on so they don't have to worry about working. There's not going to be any jobs, right? The automation's going to take all the jobs away. So you have to give them enough to live on. How is $1,000 a month enough? This story doesn't work. It doesn't work. You either have to admit it's really going to be $2,500 a month, and then how the hell are you going to pay for that? Or you have to say it's going to be $1,000 a month, and if people starve to death or don't have a place to live and they're homeless because of $1,000 a month in San Francisco or Manhattan or even here in Boca Raton, $1,000 a month doesn't get you a place to live in Boca Raton, Florida. I don't care who's going to turn down $1,000 a month. I'm not going to turn down $1,000 a month, but you got to pay for it somehow. And if you fudge what you're really going to pay out, then you're fudging what it's really going to cost, and it's not going to work. Even if they did pass a pure program, then the next session would mess with it. Exactly. Well, first of all, they wouldn't pass a pure program, but you're absolutely right. The next session would change it. The next session would change it. The Republicans would get elected. They would change it. The Democrats would get elected again. It would keep changing. I appreciate debating Yang, but he ain't coming on my podcast. I did reach out to, there's a professor who was asked about, I saw a recent tweet where a professor was talking about UBI. I think she's at University of Pennsylvania. And I'm hoping to get somebody who's a professor who talks about universal basic income to come on the channel and actually do a discussion like this. It's probably not good for the channel because people get really angry at me about this, but there's no way Yang's going to debate me on this. You know, number one, he's bigger than I am. This is a small channel. I've got 30,000 subscribers or so. Andrew Yang is much, much bigger. He's not going to waste time with me. And he's smart. Look, I don't like his position, but I recognize he's smart, and he's smart enough not to come on a channel. This is like the thing with politicians. You don't go on a channel with somebody who's going to be hostile, and I'm going to be challenged, who's going to challenge you hard. You go with somebody who's going to pat you on the, but just like Lucid Motors has gotten all this favorable coverage because nobody asked them a hard question. I asked them a hard question, they won't answer. Yeah, value-added tax will pay for it. Sure. How much is that going to cost? How much is it going to raise your sales tax? You're going to go to get a burger at McDonald's for $1, and it's going to cost you $5 because of the $4 in value-added tax. Come on. Jonathan, if you can get Andrew Yang to come on my channel and set me straight, I'm eager to talk to him. But Jonathan, you can't answer my question. Do you think it'll go through Congress to exempt taking people out of Social Security? What about $2,500 UBI, but we eliminate all social programs including Social Security? Eric, do you think people who currently get Social Security are going to agree to that? They're going to vote anybody out who votes for taking away their Social Security. You're not being realistic about politics in America. It's a weighted value-added tax. What does that mean? What does that mean it's a weighted value-added tax? Who's weighting it? Now it's not universal anymore. It'll raise the sales tax way less than the $1,000 you're getting every month. I don't think we know that. It keeps you from starving if you're in between. It's not a job replacement policy. It's proposed as a job replacement policy. The whole idea is nobody can get a job anymore because the machines have taken all the jobs. You can't say it's not a job replacement policy. That's the whole idea. Oh, he did go on Ben Shapiro. I'm going to have to watch that. I'll check that out. Thank you, Matt. I will check that out. I will look for that. I want to see how that went. I would love to have Andrew Yang on. I would love to have... I want to have somebody who is an economist, a politician, who is an advocate for this to come on my channel and talk about it. No, so what Congress passed wasn't stimulus UBI. It was just a stimulus. They just handed out cash. Scott, I agree it's not taking away Social Security. That's the problem. That means it's going to cost more. No one wants Social Security taken away. UBI plus Social Security. Look, watch the Joe Rogan interview. It's fairly early in the interview. There's a clip, I think it's a clip from the Joe Rogan interview where they specifically talked about universal basic income, and Yang very clearly said that if you got more than $1,000 a month from Social Security, you wouldn't get the UBI. Sorry. If he changed his mind, he changed his mind, but then it costs more. It costs a lot more. I don't generally watch Ben Shapiro, so no. Somebody else must watch Ben Shapiro. I mean, I like Ben Shapiro. I don't love Ben Shapiro. I don't hate him like some people do, but I don't watch, I'm too busy. I don't watch a lot of this stuff. The paperclip theory talks all about this, Warren. Google it. Send me an email with the paperclip theory and a link. Let's see. But you keep saying he's planning on taking away Social Security. Scott Tisdale, look at my video yesterday. There's a clip of Joe Rogan asking Andrew Yang about universal basic income and how much is it going to cost, and Yang says people who are getting Social Security more than $1,000 a month don't get the universal basic income. It's very plain in that video. I'm not saying he's taking away Social Security. I'm saying you're not getting the UBI. Take your pick. Let's see. Universal basic income will not make sense. Technology will make goods and services that even... So this is another point. Joseph makes this point. And Elon says something like this, that products will become very, very cheap as the machines will have a period of abundance where the machines make everything that's really cheap. And I don't agree with Elon on this, and I love Elon, so forgive me. Land isn't cheap. Land isn't going to get cheap. I don't think housing is going to get cheap. I think it's a fantasy to believe that everything's going to get cheap. I think some things will get cheap. Elon is going to make transportation inexpensive. I think it's possible that Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods will make meat less expensive in the long haul. I think Kimball Musk's Square Roots project could ultimately make vegetables less expensive. I think there's a lot of potential for some things to get less expensive. Nabidi Badidi, are you on Twitter? Yes, my handle is WR, the number 4, the letter N, the letter Y, GOV. Warren Redlick for New York governor. WR4NY Gov. I ran for governor in 2010 as the Libertarian candidate, and that's the handle I used, and that's what I continued to use most. I'm also on Twitter on Traffic Court, but I don't use it as much. And Fair DUI, but I don't use those accounts as much. I basically use those accounts to retweet my main account. If you search on Twitter for Critical Enthusiasm, I think my name is Warren Redlick Critical Enthusiasm, or Critical Enthusiasm Warren Redlick. Technology is deflationary. Governments cause inflation. I'm not convinced. I think technology can be deflationary. I definitely think governments cause inflation. Yang has said that if you get $1,000 a month UBI, you wouldn't get any other added benefits. He has said that numerous times. I think what he said was if you get more than $1,000 in other benefits, you don't get UBI. That's what I heard on the Rogan podcast. Tommy, I think you dislike Andrew Yang. I dislike many politicians. I don't actually dislike Andrew Yang. I dislike his universal basic income. Like I said, he's from my hometown or the next town over. I tend to have an affinity with people from Niskayuna because I'm from Guilderland. I want to like the guy. I think his idea is crap. Let's see. There's going to be a different robot for every type of product. The AI might not need land, but people need land. We're all going to live. What is that? Are we all going to be living like Ready Player One? What is that going to be like? 3 out of every single tax filers in the United States are currently living on less than $12,000 per year. That means tens of millions of people are already living day by day with this amount of money. I'll take your word for that, Mac. I don't know about that. That doesn't sound right. Thank you, Nabidi Badidi. Thank you for posting if you're looking in the chat and you want my Twitter account, it's in the chat right now from Nabidi Badidi, WR4NYGov. 100 years from now, so this is another thing I wanted to talk about. I mentioned I was going to talk about Neuralink. So one of the premises of universal basic income is that the machines get so much better than us that they produce everything and we don't need to produce anything. But one of the pitches that Elon Musk has made for Neuralink is that Neuralink is going to make us more productive. So that's going to put off I think ultimately AI will still be better than humans, even if humans have Neuralink at producing things. But the advent of Neuralink, and I'm like a huge believer in Neuralink. I want, people who think UBI believe in UBI, I think you're crazy. You might think I'm crazy for this, but I want a Neuralink so bad. If you follow my channel, you know my mother has Alzheimer's. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. I'm at risk. I'm 54 now. My mother's in her mid 80s. She was probably diagnosed in her early 80s. I want my Neuralink in 10 to 20 years. Before the Alzheimer's sets in. So I definitely will be an early adopter for Neuralink. I want it. I think Neuralink may confer immortality on us and all these great things, but I think Neuralink will make us more productive, and that's a valuable thing. There is another Warren Redlick lawyer on Twitter. That's probably me. I have an account named Traffic Court. But I don't use that account, so please use the WR4NYGov. There will be a classification of Moon, Mars, and space people. Do you have a proposal for job loss, or do you think this is a false outlook? So if you go back in my channel, I have a video that's titled something like 10 industries Tesla will destroy, or 10 industries Elon Musk will destroy. I think the job loss is bigger than Yang and Elon are talking about. I think you're going to see entire industries wiped out. I think that, for example, the internal combustion industry is going to be wiped out. The petroleum industry is going to be wiped out. The airline industry is going to be wiped out. The railroad industry is going to be wiped out. The car insurance industry is going to be wiped out. The legal industry, people who do drunk driving defense, well, there's not going to be any more drunk drivers if cars are driving themselves. The criminal defense, half of criminal cases start with a traffic stop. Well, there's not going to be traffic. There's not going to be a reason to have traffic stops anymore if the cars are driving perfectly. So you're going to wipe out half of criminal law. There's not going to be any more car accident cases, so you're going to wipe out that area of law. There's so, and it's going to have a big impact on medicine because there's going to be a lot fewer orthopedic injuries and neurological injuries from accidents. There's all kinds of ways we're going to see this huge change. It's going to destroy far more jobs than Andrew Yang is talking about. It's going to be amazing, but it's the wrong way to think about it, to think it's going to destroy jobs and people are going to suffer. It's going to destroy jobs and free those people up to do something more productive than what they were doing before. If you take that positive view, remember this channel, my tagline is critical enthusiasm, critical analysis combined with enthusiasm. You can look at the job loss and say, oh, this is terrible because these people will lose their jobs. And I look at it and say, this is wonderful. They're freed from doing labor that machines can do better so that they can now do other things where they add more value and they can make more money. Okay, what do you think of that spin? We're not taking them away from, we're taking, people are complaining they're going to lose their retail jobs. They're going to lose those bank teller jobs. Those are crappy jobs. People don't make a lot of money in those jobs. Truck driver, it's a crappy job. Andrew Yang talks about truck drivers. There's a truck driver shortage right now. It's the second time in 3 years we've had a truck driver shortage. Truck drivers are finding better things to do with their time already anyway. They don't want that job. They want to have a better job anyway. So get rid of this stuff and let the economy grow. Stop thinking that government is going to solve the problem. Government is rigid and makes things worse. Get government out of the way, let the jobs go, and let a dynamic economy create new jobs. That's the solution. And you don't like that solution because you want security, you want safety, you want to trust that it's going to be done the right way. Markets do it better than government. Markets adapt, markets make things better. Government doesn't make things better. Bernie Sanders didn't invent an electric car and manufacture an electric car that can go 400 miles. Okay? No matter how much Bernie can say he wants electric cars, Bernie is shitting on Elon Musk when Elon Musk is doing exactly what Bernie says he wants. Because Bernie doesn't want the private sector to do it. He wants the government to do it. Let's see. No, it's not a transition tool. If you use UBI, you're screwing the economy and you make it harder for the economy to adapt. How can I not see UBI as being relevant? UBI is relevant if you want to destroy the economy. If you want to free the economy and have the economy, that we have the potential to have a dynamic economy that creates new jobs, new and better jobs. That's what's happened throughout our history. We've had wrenching technological change for the last 100+ years, maybe longer. We've gone from people living in caves and huts and riding donkeys or walking to flying in planes and driving in cars. We've gone to this magically incredible world. In 100 years, things have, our lives have improved immeasurably. We can communicate with people like we're doing right now. This was impossible 100 years ago. What we're doing right now was completely impossible 100 years ago. There's so much in our lives that's amazing and new. And in a dynamic economy, it adjusts, new jobs are created, and people find ways of being productive. When government steps in and gets in the way, it slows that dynamic change down and people get screwed worse. So UBI is a problem, not a solution. Sun Tzu, the prince. He said he goes where he's invited. So if anybody thinks I should interview Andrew Yang and you're a big supporter of UBI, please reach out to him and tell him, hey, this guy Warren Redlick wants to interview you. Check out this live stream he did, or check out this video he did. He wants to take you on. I'll talk to Andrew Yang and tell him I'm from Guilderland, because he'll know what Guilderland is. Guilderland, Guilderland. So is it possible Yang knows this and as a socialist wants to destroy capitalism? That's a good question. I think they're all socialists. I think Trump and Bush are socialists, so UBI creates a trickle-up economy. Please Google Scott Santens. Scott Santens is on here. Scott Santens is on the chat, and I think he commented on the video. And I watched I saw what his video. Scott Santens is responding to Steve Forbes' criticism of universal basic income, not mine. I voted for Joe George. Jonathan Root asks who I voted for. If you follow me, I am a libertarian. I was the libertarian candidate for the governor of New York in 2010, running against Andrew Cuomo. I vote libertarian in every presidential election. I was tempted to vote for someone else in this election. Not going to say who, but the temptation was not very strong. I hate both Democrat and Republican candidates, and I hate both major parties for a variety of reasons. I have a personal reason for hating Donald Trump that is separate and above everything else, but I voted for Joe Jorgensen, as I always do. I did not vote for Trump. I have a personal, very personal reason for hating Donald Trump. So I could not get over. I was slightly tempted to vote for Trump because I think the Democrats have gone batshit crazy, but I could not vote for Trump because I have personal reasons why I hate him. And fundamentally, I believe that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are not that different. They're both... One of my biggest issues that we'll probably never talk about on this channel again is I'm anti-war. I'm opposed to war. And Trump and Biden are both war candidates. Hillary Clinton was a war candidate. Bush is a war candidate. I'm anti-war. Joe Jorgen is a peace candidate. I want no war. I don't know why you guys think I voted for Trump. I hate Trump for personal reasons. I did not vote for him. Commentary is fine. No need to meet and greet in person for interview. And we can do it by Skype, Jim. I could do a Skype interview with Andrew Yang. I would love to do that. I do Skype interviews all the time. Somebody wants to hook up and get Andrew Yang to agree to do a Skype interview with me, I would love to do it. I'll take him on. Maybe he'll persuade me. Hey, the goal is to be less wrong, right? We're always wrong. The goal is to be less wrong. I'm open to him showing me that I'm wrong. Okay? So... any dynamic market development will be in favor of market efficiency, hence without inefficient humans. That's what happens when you put your trust in the megacorps. Okay, so Nat say, I'm going to encourage you to go to 32 minutes in my video yesterday and see what I said about the law of comparative advantage. Humans can produce efficiently and make things better. So, let's see. So let's address this question. So Nat Say is laughing that I said that Trump and Biden are similar. What the fuck? Okay, or WTF. So the answer to your question is, under Barack Obama, the United States had troops in 177 countries. Under Donald Trump, we have troops in 177 countries. Under Barack Obama, we were bombing 8 countries. Under Donald Trump, we are bombing 8 countries. Under Joe Biden, we will have troops in 177 countries, and we will be bombing 8 countries. Under all recent presidents, we've had a war on drugs. Under recent presidents, we've had border controls. Under recent presidents, we've had heavy deficit spending, increasing debt, money printing. 98% of what the federal government does, the insiders in D.C., the Democrats and Republicans agree on. The other 2% that we see these huge arguments about are for show. They don't even care. You think Trump cares about abortion? I think he probably paid for a few. Okay? They don't care about gay marriage. They don't care about any of this stuff. They use the hot button issues to distract us from how they're stealing our money on the other 98% of the issues. That's what I think of the Republican and Democratic parties. And Trump and Biden and Obama and Bush and whoever. Yang is almost an adult joke on Zoom. Good on you, an anti-war point. Those who served our country and are facing a disability as a result would continue to receive their benefits on top of the $1,000 a month. Okay, so what you're saying is that he lied to Joe Rogan. Okay, however you want to do it. You know, you got to pick how you want to go there. Tesla got a big fat government loan. Yes, and they paid it back with interest early. Biden racist court. Yes, Biden. They're both racists. Well, first of all, if you follow the show Avenue Q, which is a Broadway show, I have a kid. My daughter is a budding, hopefully a musical theater student on Broadway. If you've ever seen the show Avenue Q, which I saw for my 10th anniversary, I think, everyone's a little bit racist. I personally think that Biden is more racist than Trump, but I don't think either one of them is particularly racist. I think they're just power-hungry people. Which candidate would be better for EVs and the environment? Well, so for EVs overall, I don't think there's a clear choice. I think EVs don't need government help. I think electric vehicles are already better than internal combustion engine vehicles. So, hang on, I'm just going to switch something here. I use an ice pack to cool my laptop for the video. So I brought a second ice pack. Which candidate would be better for EVs? So I think there's a premise that is false, that the Democrats think we need government subsidies to get EVs off the ground, and EVs are already off the ground. Teslas are already better than internal combustion engine vehicles. Tesla doesn't need help. Internal combustion engine vehicles and the oil industry and fossil fuel industry get massive subsidies from government. I would eliminate those. So all politicians have paid for abortions. Well, the best candidate for EVs in the environment would be Joe Jorgensen, because the biggest polluter is the federal government and the U.S. military. So if we bring all the troops home, we'll be polluting a lot less. Let's see. Would you rather see divided government or a sweep by one side? I would rather see libertarians win elections. Is the only way to actually get a libertarian in the U.S. entryism, like Ron Paul and the GOP. So Kay Bingo follows me on Twitter, and I follow her on Twitter, and I love her. I think she's in I think she's in England or the United Kingdom. I preach small government. I believe in small government. I have zero faith that we're going to go anywhere near smaller government anytime in the future until something happens. And UBI is something that it's not something I want to happen. It's kind of like the way Elon talks. I think we're going to see a collapse. I think we're spending too much money. We're borrowing too much money. We're printing too much money. We're going to see an economic collapse. One of the reasons I'm building the cyber cabinet is so I have a place to go when society collapses, where I'm far enough out of the way that the zombie apocalypse, the zombie apocalypse is a metaphor for when the grocery store shelves go empty, and all the people in the city start wandering around looking for food, and they'll take yours if they can get it. And my cyber cabinet is so far out in the middle of nowhere that nobody's going to find it or even look for it. So I believe we're going to have a massive economic collapse, a global economic collapse, and somewhere between 20% and 90% of the human population is going to die. And then we can try to rebuild a society that isn't so stupid and recognizes that you can't get away from personal responsibility. The only way to build a sensible society is with individual liberty and personal responsibility. And if you think government can take care of you, then you believe in the magic horn of plenty, and you need to stop believing in fairy tales. So, you want me to be blunt? I'll be blunt. Do I see a future to Intel's Mobileye there and stuff? I think Mobileye is interesting, and I feel like I don't know. This is Udi Kafri asks about Mobileye. I think Mobileye is interesting. I don't think they are getting enough data or the right data or have the right software set up to be able to take advantage of the data they are getting to get self-driving working the same way Tesla. I think Tesla is probably 5 years ahead of Mobileye, and I don't think Mobileye is, and I think Tesla's gaining. I think their lead is stretching. I think maybe the closest competitor is Comma.ai, because I just believe George Hotz is a brilliant guy, but I don't think they have the hardware suite on the cars to be able to deliver full self-driving the way Tesla is. So maybe Comma.ai could be there. We'll see. Do I think Tesla stock will survive a collapse? Well, if it's a big collapse, no. If it's the collapse where 20% of the Earth's population dies or 90% of the Earth's population dies, then no. Tesla doesn't survive a collapse. Oh, I don't think it's just going to be the poor people that die, Jonathan. But 90% of them, a lot of rich people are going to die too. Maybe you should plant a grove nearby so you have some food. I want to get a Square Roots trailer. I want to get Kimball Musk's Square Roots thing. Where my cabin is, there's a lot of pigs, and I could probably farm the land, but we'll see about that. Yeah, that's gonna kill the. Well, the question is, when does the collapse happen, right? So I have friends who've been waiting for the collapse for 20 years. Maybe the collapse is 50 years away. Maybe the advent of Tesla, Neuralink, all the technological improvements improve it's possible that the technology improves faster than the rest of society goes downhill, and the technology improvements save us from the disaster that's impending. That's my hope. I don't want the collapse to happen. I just want to be ready for it if it does. And I am hopeful. It's one of the things I love about Elon Musk. It's what I love about Neuralink, SpaceX, Tesla, Boring Company, is it's giving us a chance to lower costs of things enough that we have a survivable future even after this happens. The problem with government is the bribes or campaign contributions. You need public-funded elections, not private-funded elections. They will be bribed whether you have public-funded elections or private. A great book, maybe I should put this in the description. There's a great book. If you're interested in the politics of and special interest politics, there's a really good book by a guy named Peter Schweizer, who Democrats tend to hate because he's written some books that are critical of Democrats on corruption, but he's actually written some bipartisan books on corruption. And my favorite is the book Extortion, where he does an expose on both Republicans and Democrats and how politicians use their power to extort money from special interests. So that's a very different take, because everybody sees it as the special interests bribing the politicians. What if it's the politicians who have the power and they're extorting the special interests instead of the other way around? The best strategy for libertarians is to create a prototype society and show it can work. The United States was mostly libertarian for the first 100 years, and it worked for most people. And if you're going to say slavery, we've got more black people in jail in America today than we had slaves then. So if not UBI, then what? If not UBI, then what? A dynamic economy, a free economy that's dynamic, that creates jobs. You can't expect us to just trust a new mythical jobs appearing. I can't trust UBI to manufacture a magic horn of plenty. I trust the dynamic economy to create new jobs a lot more than I trust Andrew Yang to use his magic horn of plenty to feed us all. If campaigns are public, and sorry, well, it's just one other thing about universal basic income that I talked about in yesterday's video. A couple people, including Elon, talked about that it's not really about the money. Elon has talked about this world of abundance where everything is inexpensive, that if people don't have work, what is their meaning in life? How do they find meaning in life? And this is a really deep challenge, and there's no easy answer for it. For most of human history, our meaning in life came from work. It could be working to improve your own life. It could be working to support your family. It could be working to build up your community. It could be helping others. If the machines do everything better than us and machines do everything for us, what is our purpose? What is our function? And if we don't have any of that, is there meaning to our lives? That's a deep, dark, deep, tough question. I don't have an easy answer to that one. Paul, thank you very much for your contribution. Why do Americans talk about big government is bad, small government is good? I live in Norway. I do not fear having no money. My fear is of disease, pain, and death. If I'm not mistaken, Paul, and you can correct me on this, people in Norway get a huge amount of money from North Sea oil. Your economy is funded by oil. Tell me if I'm wrong about that, Paul. Norway has a largely homogenous society. The United States has a very diverse demographic. A lot of our problems aren't really because of a problem with our economy or our government, but because there are segments of our population that just have a lot of problems. Read Rise of the Robots by Martin Ford. I'm not disputing that we're going to see revolutionary change, massive change. I've said, watch my video, 10 Industries. 10 Industries Elon will destroy, or Tesla will destroy. People want $1,000 per month of cash grabbers. The money, look, if the machines are making everything so cheap, what do you need the money for? Everything's free. We just solved the problem. Let's see. Norway's a good place. I wish I lived there. So there, who is white? Jonathan, I don't know who you're talking about. The problem with government, John Hanson, the problem with government is government. Incentives are all to manage problems. Solving one decreases one's budget and power, so isn't desired. Individual liberty and responsibility is essential. Yeah, there's a great, I think it was a political scientist who talked about, William Niskanen, I think. He had a theory of bureaucracy that the goal of the bureaucrat is to maximize his budget. So Niskanen. I have a master's in political science, which, if I have, $3, I can get on a New York subway. With that's what my master's in political science gets me. Retired people still have meaning, don't they? Well, that's a big question. I don't know the answer to that. I think that retired people have meaning if they find something meaningful to do. I don't know the answer to that question. That's a great question, Gavin. I wish I had an answer. Jonathan, I said that they work because they have a relatively homogenous society. Japan has an homogenous society and they're not white. UBI is not instead of work. And the reality is that there are certain ethnicities who have bigger health problems because of their ethnicity, not because we have a bad government. They have the same health problems in the native land that they have here. When the people find that they can vote themselves money, that will herald. Is that a real quote from Benjamin Franklin, Night Trekker? When the people find that they can vote themselves money, that will herald the end of the republic. I believe it, Ben. I believe it, Night. I believe he said it. I don't know if he said it. It sounds like one of those Abraham Lincoln quotes. something I read about Abraham Lincoln wrote on the internet, on his blog post or something. Would you say a renaissance is starting now? I think we're in a really interesting time. I think the advent of new technology is accelerating. I think we're going to see incredible change. Would you debate Yang if he agreed? Absolutely. I don't know if I would interview him. I would debate him too, whatever. I would love to talk to Andrew Yang about universal basic income or whatever else you wanted to talk about. I like the guy on a personal level. I just don't like his politics. Most people are adaptable. Some retirees suffer, some thrive. Fine. Okay. I want more. I'm retired for years. If you feel like giving up, take the next bus to nowhere. Yeah, honestly, I'm 54. I retired at 45, and I turned out I didn't like being retired, and I just kept finding things to do. On top of unemployment due to automation, a lot of employment is useless, is disguised unemployment, either exploiting the system. Yeah, I agree with that. Hardly anyone in the world lives on a whole $1,000 a month. Well, lots of people live on less than that, but they live in poor countries where the money goes a lot farther. All right, so we're not 3 hours yet. I feel like I'm running out of steam. I'm going to wait one more minute just to see if any good questions pop up. And I'm going to stay. I'm going to end the stream shortly, and I'm going to stay on the chat for another. I think the chat lasts 5 minutes after I end the stream. So don't cross the streams. Ghostbusters. Anybody like Ghostbusters? All right. I'm not seeing a lot more questions, so I need to give it Ubuntu movement. I don't know about Ubuntu. Have you heard of the analogy of libertarians are like house? Well, leading libertarians is like herding cats. I don't know that they're like house cats. I was involved in a libertarian organization, and trying to lead libertarians is like trying to herd cats. Once your neighbor can afford housing and food without work, they can choose development. Sure. Or they can choose drugs. Will ICE vehicles be sent to the third world? Probably. I would expect that used ICE vehicles will be sent to the third world. I don't know about Jacques Fresco. Do I think the stock will fall? I think the stock will fluctuate. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters. I think that I don't like talking about short-term movements in stock prices because it's impossible to know. They get moved all kinds of ways. I like to talk about the long-term fundamentals of companies. So people ask me about other stocks. I'm really interested in Beyond Meat. People have been asking about NEO. I looked a little bit into NEO. I think it's a really interesting question. Who has a great growth plan? I think Beyond Meat. Do you guys know about Beyond Meat? Beyond Meat they grow meat from plants, I think it's from peas and other plants. And it's actually, I had a Beyond Meat burger. I thought it was pretty good at a chain called BurgerFi. Thank you, K Bingo. Thank you very much. Have you considered 10 new industries opportunities that autonomy EVs will create? So K Bingo asks, I talked about the industries I think will be destroyed. Have I thought about industries that autonomy and EVs will create? And the answer is, I think it's really, really hard to predict what would be created, but I have one idea. It's a broad idea. I think destination resorts, which could be beaches, it could be Disney World. So let me give you the backstory on this. I live in South Florida. I live between Miami and West Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale, somewhere in that area, about 3-hour drive from Disney World. And I'm personally not a Disney World person. We have Disney World, we have Universal Studios, and I think there's another theme park up there. So it's a 3-hour drive. If somebody from South Florida wants to go to Disney World, it's a 3-hour drive. You're pretty much going to get a hotel. You're going to spend the night. Maybe you're going to stay 2 nights and you're going to come home. And it ends up being very expensive because, it costs you 60 cents a mile. Let's say it's 200 miles each way. So it costs you $240 it costs you to drive. You spend a couple $100 a night for the hotel. There's $400 it costs you a couple $100 to go into Disney. It's a big trip. It costs a lot of money. There's some breaks for Florida residents for that. So suppose you could do Disney and there's a Hyperloop or a loop. Let's say there's a 150-mile-an-hour loop that you drive your EV or you take a robo-taxi and you hop on a loop. And let's say optimistically it's a Hyperloop. And I can get from my house to Disney in half an hour for $20. Instead of it costing me $240 round trip, it cost me $40 round trip. And instead of having to pay for a hotel, I'm home in half an hour. So I don't have to pay for a hotel. Now, a large segment of the population in South Florida, and probably Jacksonville and Tallahassee and maybe Atlanta, a much larger segment of the population is going to be going to a place like Disney and Universal Studios a lot more frequently. So I think Disney And the same thing would be true at Disneyland in Los Angeles and Tokyo Disney and maybe Euro Disney if it still exists. Theme parks. Key West in Florida is a popular tourist attraction. I like Key West. It's great nightlife. They have great restaurants and bars and live music, and it's great for the sunrise and sunset. I could see taking a Hyperloop to Key West for the day. Get there early for the sunrise, find somewhere to take a nap on the beach, stay for the sunset, enjoy some live music at night, great food, and hop in the Hyperloop and come home. And it cost me $40 round trip plus whatever I spend there. Traffic getting to Key West is absolutely awful. So if you had a Hyperloop going there from here, it would be amazing. So I think the potential for destinations that people want to go, whether it's Disney World or Key West or, pick your location, the potential for that is really, really amazing. So let's see. Stick to talking about EVs. Please check. So that was the answer to K Bingo's question. What do I think? I don't think I can predict 10 growth industries. I do think that the idea of destinations being, transportation becomes very, very inexpensive. Then all of a sudden, people will travel more. People will go places more. I think that becomes, and they can come home at night. And so I think it might be bad for the hotel industry, right? But the other side of that is, if my trip goes from 3 hours to 20 minutes and somebody else's trip goes from 10 hours to 3 hours, then maybe that guy stays in the hotel and even more people are coming from, even further away. And, Disney World becomes this mega complex, basically takes over Orlando, becomes 10 times the size or bigger, and they have 10 times as many rides. I think it's potential. Thank you, Tommy. I love you too. I know about the Venus. The Venus Project is actually not that far. VB says, please check out documentary on the Venus Project. The Venus Project is probably about 5 or 10 miles from where my cyber cabin is going to be. So I am familiar with it. Let's see. With money and no employment, rioting, looting, etc. rise. I don't know about that. All right. So we're approaching 3 hours. And I'm getting tired, honestly. Boring tunnels under the ocean. Oh, this is a great one. Sorry, this is a great one. Boring tunnels under the ocean versus electric cargo ships. So I think that boring tunnels, it's a really good question. I think we're going to see boring tunnels to the spaceports. Let's cover this. I'll probably do a video on this soon. I have a video where I talk about SpaceX spaceports and where they're going to put spaceports. And I have this spot off, right, not very far from me at the edge of the Bahamas that could be a great spaceport. But Elon's been talking about building a platform to do space launches because I think Starship and Space Super Heavy is so powerful they don't want to do it near any human population. So I think they're going to be building a platform in the Gulf of Mexico, maybe 20 miles south of Boca Chica, and that's where the first spaceport's going to be, which has better weather generally than the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean, so it's probably a better spot to launch from. So what was the question I was answering? So I think that's going to be interesting, is spaceports. So I think we're going to see hyperloops or loops to spaceports. And I picture, if you check out my video, you'd have to go on my channel and search for spaceport, and you'll see I have a video where I talk about where spaceports might be. And if you do hyperloops from, so here's one of the challenges for Starship point to point is there enough travel? Starship point to point is for very long distance travel, to be able to go from, let's say, Los Angeles to Shanghai or New York to Sao Paulo, Brazil, or something like that. And I question whether there's enough people who want to make that trip to sustain 1,000 passenger thing traveling 4 times a day. But what if it was at a spaceport that was 100 miles from 4 major cities, or a few hundred miles from 4 major cities connected by Hyperloop, and so you had 1 or 2 on the Asian Pacific coast, and 1 or 2 on the U.S. Pacific coast, and 1 or 2 on the U.S. East Coast, and 1 or 2 on the European coast, or whatever. And you were able to do these trips, and each spaceport connected to 5 or 10 major cities by Hyperloop. So it takes you a half hour to get from your city to the spaceport by Hyperloop, and then a half hour to get to the next spaceport that you're going to, and then a half hour to get where you're going, and you travel anywhere in the world in an hour and a half. Throw in an extra half hour for, you know, all the things you got to do in the middle. So let's say 3 hours to anywhere in the world for a reasonable price. And that could be amazing. And that's where you get boring tunnels going underwater to get to the spaceports. Once you're doing that, maybe you do boring tunnels to go longer for cargo. I'm not sure whether that would be more cost effective than electric ships, though. I don't know the answer to that question. What are my thoughts on Tesla's solar and autobuilder? I believe that the cost of solar per kilowatt hour is still falling rapidly, and it's going to take over all energy production. It's possible that wind will also be significant, and I don't know enough about autobuilder. I think autobuilder sounds cool, but I just don't know enough. Spaceports will be international locations, maybe. Venus Project is too small, and I don't think it's meaningful. You were about to talk about boring tunnels under ocean. So Natsay asks, boring tunnels under ocean instead of freight ships. So right now, a lot of goods are shipped from continent to continent by freight, by ships, these large ships, and I think those ships will go electric. It is possible that Boring Company will be able to bore tunnels. It seems likely that they will be able to bore tunnels from one continent to another, and that will be another way of delivering cargo from place to place. I don't know if Boring Company tunnels would be more efficient than shipping. I think shipping is very efficient. I think the cost per pound or ton of shipping something across the sea on the ocean is already very, very cheap. So I'm not sure how much cheaper it would be at the Boring Company. It would be faster. That's a really good question. I don't know enough, and I don't know whether they need, if it's cargo, I don't think you're worried about ventilation as much. I think there's a huge challenge with ventilating a tunnel that's very, very long. I mean, the Channel Tunnel does it, but, you know, that's, 30, 40 miles, I guess. I don't even know how long the Channel Tunnel is, 20, 30, 40 miles. An under the ocean tunnel would be hundreds or thousands of miles, and, I don't know how you ventilate that. So that's a potential challenge. I don't know enough about that. What about floating battery charging stations at sea as the battery prices drop and energy increase? It's an interesting idea, but I think ocean weather is kind of tough. There should be much less international trade too. For one thing, no more super. Yes, I think oil tankers will be gone. I think we will still find ways to use oil. It'll be a long time before we stop using oil, but we'll be using a lot less of it. Automated cargo trains. I do think automated cargo trains under the ocean is a good idea. I don't know how much that costs per ton compared to ships, and I don't know how valuable the speed is definitely valuable. So if it costs a little more but it's faster, that would make a lot of sense. I don't think tectonic plates matter. Elon has talked about that. The tunnels do better in an earthquake than the surface does. Weather affects the launches, so a more stable environment is best for rocket launches. Maybe I missed an earlier bit, Jim. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I think that the stable environment of the Gulf is better than the ocean. I would like to see it on an island, but I don't know. Dubai Ports World is already involved with Hyperloop. Yes. An intercontinental tunnel would need hundreds of TBMs simultaneously digging. I don't think that's true. I think it would just take a while. I think you would need 2 TBMs, and maybe depends on where you're going. Like, what if you went sort of like you went along up northeast along the US coast and went along through Greenland and back down rather than going straight across? That might work. You'd be under the bottom of the ocean, so I'm not sure what the pressure would be. I don't know how that would work either. That's a good question. It might take too long to tunnel under the ocean, but it might be viable too. I think the question is, what if the tunnel went to the Bering Strait instead of going straight under the ocean? What if the tunnel went up along Greenland and Iceland and back down, so it was encountering land a lot along the way? Is there a way of making that work? Maybe. I don't know. Technocracy is communism 2.0. Yeah, it's a good question. John Stubb makes a good point about the pressure. I don't know how it would be. I don't know if there are shallow routes you could take where you're not going too far down, so the pressure wouldn't be too bad. I don't know the answer to that. How long for a snail to crawl across the ocean? Yeah, it would take a while. That's true. Let's see. I lived in Cali most of my life, and oil rigs are part of the landscape. Yeah. All right. We're at 2 hours. I'm out of steam. Thank you all very much for watching. Please check out my other videos. I'm going to stay on the stream for 5 minutes. on the chat for 5 minutes so we can talk on the chat. And please, let me know what you think in the comments. Hey, everybody, thanks very much for watching. I really enjoyed this today.